If you're retiring with a good pension, then your retirement is going to look very different than most. And that's both a huge opportunity as well as a potential trap because while most retirement plans rely almost entirely on 401ks or other types of company sponsored retirement plans, along with Social Security, having a pension changes everything. It changes how much you need to save, when you can retire, how you invest, and even whether you have to keep working. But here's the problem. Most people with pensions don't fully understand just how powerful they really are or how to structure the rest of their plan around it. So, in this video, I'm going to show you how a pension completely changes your retirement and what you need to do differently if you want to get the most out of it. So, let's dive in here. So, for most retirees, there's two major income sources, right? You've got Social Security and then withdrawals, maybe from a 401k or an IRA or some other company sponsored retirement plan. That means they're responsible for managing how much to take out, how to invest, and really how long all the money needs to last. Right? There's a lot more decisions that are involved. But if you have a pension, you're playing in a different game because a pension is a guaranteed monthly income for life. And that changes everything. I mean, let's say your pension pays, $4,000 a month. If you add in Social Security, maybe that's another $3,000 a month. And so that's $7,000 per month of fixed, reliable income, even before you touch your investments. Now, that income floor gives you something that most retirees just don't have. It gives you that predictability, more peace of mind, more flexibility as well with your other monies that aren't needed to help create your income floor. Now, suddenly the pressure to save $1 million or $2 million or whatever that magic number is, right? Now that fades. For some folks, a pension could provide for a big chunk of your income needs, perhaps even all of your income needs, depending on how much you're actually getting from the pension. So here's where it gets tricky, though, because while a pension gives you more stability, it also requires some very different planning decisions than a typical 401k only retirement. And if you get these wrong, it could end up hurting your retirement. So let's take a look at the three most important planning strategies that I walk retirees through when they have a pension. So, number one, you might not need to save as much. So, with the pension, you may not need to build a massive portfolio. Let's say you need $7,000 a month to live comfortably. Well, if your Social Security benefits gives you $3,000 a month and your pension gives you another, $2,800, that's 5,800 right there. Then your gap, your income gap is only $1,200 a month or $14,400 a year. Now that's a lot easier to cover with savings than if you were just receiving, $3,000 from Social Security and then you needed to withdraw $4,000 a month or $48,000 a year from your savings. So here's another way to think about just how valuable a pension is. Multiply your monthly benefit by 12 and that'll get you the annual amount. Then multiply that by 20 or 25, which would give you a rough idea of about how much you would have to have saved, assuming that you use a 4% or a 5% withdrawal rate. So let's say that your pension pays $3,000 a month, which is $36,000 a year. Multiplied by 25 is $900,000. Multiplied by 20, it's $720,000. In other words, in just rough numbers here, you might consider that to be the lump sum equivalent to having the pension. This is why you don't need to have as much saved. Now, unfortunately, I've seen some people that keep working just simply out of habit. They don't realize that their pension already covers maybe 80 or 90% of their needs. And so really they probably already have enough saved to retire. As I talk about so often, maybe they see something on the news, the TV, some magazine. Those articles and those other things don't know your situation. So for you, knowing what your expenses are, and then knowing what your income floor is, meaning how much you're going to get each month guaranteed from a pension or perhaps also from Social Security. This can help you to get a clear idea of really where you stand when it comes to having a reliable income stream in retirement in order to meet your living expenses. The next thing is that your investment strategy could probably be more aggressive, not less. And this surprises some people, I find. I've heard people say things like, yeah, I've got a pension, but overall, I think I'm a pretty conservative investor. And now that I'm retired, shouldn't I, be conservative? Isn't that what would make most sense? And if you think about it, though, your pension already provides a lot of conservative, stable income, especially if you have a good, sizable pension. And one way to think about it is that the pension is kind of like the bond portion or the fixed income portion of your portfolio. And by having a pension and thus having more guaranteed income, that could give you the opportunity to then invest more aggressively with your other retirement savings, not less. And because of the pension, you could probably afford to just, take more risk with the rest of your money. Now, with guaranteed income covering most or maybe even all of your basic income needs, you may not need to withdraw very much from the rest of your portfolio, from your retirement savings. If we go back, a second to my simple example that I talked about earlier, let's say that you have $700,000 saved. Well, if you need $48,000 a year from your portfolio, that's a 6.8% withdrawal rate. Now, that's pretty high. And if you're invested aggressively, say in a 100% stock portfolio and the market went down significantly, especially early in retirement, that could put you at a very real risk of running out of money. And that's referred to as, sequence of returns risk. However, if you're only needing, let's say, $14,400 from the same $700,000 portfolio because you have that pension, well, now your withdrawal rate is only about 2%. And keep this in mind too, you could very well be retired for 20 years or 30 years or perhaps even longer in retirement. And so if you can afford to be more aggressive, if it makes sense, a more aggressive strategy could help to potentially outpace inflation even more so over time and help to provide more money down the road. And then, of course, you could use that for future healthcare costs, perhaps, or really anything that you might want to spend that money on. Now, if you never need the money, that money could just go on to your kids, to grandkids, or a charity, but at least there would be even more money that could be passed down. And the next thing is that you need to choose the right pension payout option. One of the key parts of pension planning is that you need to pick a payout option. And typically you can't change it. And so what should you do? Should you take the single life option with the highest payout? Or should you take the joint life with a reduced amount, but one that comes with continued payments for your spouse? The right choice depends upon your health, your spouse's health, your spouse's income. I mean, really just your overall, your full retirement picture. And so some things to keep in mind, choosing life only, could mean a higher check, of course. But, the downside with that is that there's no survivor benefits when you pass away. And if you pass away, especially if you pass away early, that could put your spouse in a really bad situation. Now, some retirees use life insurance to offset the risk of choosing the higher payout. And so you really have to run the numbers with this to see if it makes sense. And sometimes it does, and other times it really doesn't. The way it works, let's say it's me. Let's say I'm getting the pension, and let's say I take life only, but I take a portion of that money that I get paid each month from my pension, and I use it to pay premiums for a life insurance policy. Now, if I die first, then my wife will get the death benefit. And of course, the pension will stop. Now, if my wife dies first, I can just cancel the policy and continue to receive the higher single life payout from the pension. So, this is where you need to factor in everything, including your health and your spouse's health and everything like that. Another thing to consider here is that you may be able to take your pension as a lump sum as opposed to a monthly payout. Now, if this is available, you want to make sure that you look at the specific terms that are being offered in order to make sure that you're really making the best decision for you. One of the benefits of taking a lump sum is, of course, the flexibility and the control that you have of the money. You could invest it, you could spend it how you like, right? There's a lot of freedom, a lot of flexibility. Now, comes with that some responsibility. And so, if good decisions aren't being made, then that could end up being a bad decision by taking that lump sum. Now, if you invest the money, you may be better off if your investments do quite well. On the other hand, if you invest that money and your investments don't do so well, then maybe not. Another benefit though of doing a lump sum is it can help put you in more control of your taxes because again, you have that freedom and flexibility on how much you're going to withdraw, especially before you have to take out your required minimum distributions. So maybe you want to do some Roth conversions, or maybe you just want to manage your withdrawals and pick and choose how much you're going to withdraw from which accounts and when, depending upon how they're taxed, in order to reduce the taxes that you have to pay. So again, it puts you in a little bit more control, really a lot more control as far as that's concerned. But again, that comes with that is making sure that good decisions and things that are being made. Another thing to consider here is that if you do take the pension as a lump sum and you actually want guaranteed monthly income, you might be able to get a higher monthly payout with an annuity from an insurance company out on the open market. So it's something that you would definitely want to check into before making your pension election. So here's where things get really powerful. So let's say that you elect a monthly pension along with Social Security. Maybe you have a good pension, it's paying you a good amount. Maybe you're also, again, you're getting Social Security, and those two income streams, maybe those cover all of your needs. And then you have your savings, your retirement savings, right? And so you can use all that for your wants. And so by having this, you can build a plan that feels both secure and flexible. And in practice, what does that mean? Well, you could withdraw money from your investment accounts, perhaps only in years when the market is strong. And the pension can be helpful to combat sequence of returns risk because you're not forced to sell your investments during market downturns. And you could save your portfolio for healthcare needs, perhaps future long-term care expenses, maybe home upgrades, things that you want to, do in the house, or maybe some big travel plans that you might have. Now, you may just choose to leave your IRA as a result because you don't need it in order to live on if you have plenty of money coming in to meet your needs from the pension and Social Security. So you might just leave your IRA untouched, allowing it to grow until, of course, again, you have to start withdrawing it to account for required minimum distributions. Having a pension doesn't just make retirement easier; it makes it completely different. It shifts how much you need to save, how you invest, and how early you may be able to walk away from work. But it also comes with some major decisions, right? Payout options, investment strategy, income planning, tax planning, all these things. And you only get one chance to get it right. So if you want help figuring out, how to build your entire retirement plan around your pension, I've added a link below where you could schedule a free strategy call. And we'll walk through your numbers, your goals, your income, and your options so that you can retire with clarity and confidence. I'll see you next time.